Hello and welcome to the Atlas Solutions podcast. My name is Brian. He's Chad. And today we're going to talk about some new Apple hardware. Hey, Chad, how's it going?
Hey, Brian. So finally, at long wait, these new MacBook Pros are starting to hit people's desks. So we've been hearing rumors forever. The rumor mills are tough in Apple, and we talk a lot about not really getting into rumors because you just don't know. But when they finally hit, you got to kind of soak up what they announce and say, all right, is this the right machine for me? What's the difference? Is it worth the money? There's all those questions. So we want to try to clarify some of that. We're not, you can go and read apple.com, and, when you pull up the feature list of these things, it can be a little bit intimidating. So we're going to dig into just kind of what's the deal with the new chips? What's the deal with the new screen and that sort of thing? And then Brian, and I'm going to pass it back to you because you have yours and we want to hear firsthand.
All right,
what it's looking like. So I've talked about this on the podcast before, but I want to go back into just the basic structure of a computer. Computers are made up of a couple of parts. You've got a hard drive, you've got RAM, you've got the processor. Now, I remember when I was in college, they kind of used this analogy of cache and RAM and hard drives as like a library. And I believe I used this analogy before. So if you're doing a book study with old school books, of course, without a computer, you would use cache as the first thing, basically like the books on your desk, things that you're going to reach and grab and take back and forth very often. Then the next level would be your local library. So maybe you drive to the local library and you get a book and you bring it back, or maybe even a better example would be like your bookshelf. So it takes a little effort. You got to walk over to the bookshelf, and then you'd go to the local library, and then that external hard drive or that server, that's like driving to the Library of Congress. You got to go get those books. So on a computer, it's very much the same way. You've got cache and RAM, and then hard drives and external hard drives and servers. And the data's living in all these different places. The M1 chip was a real step forward in processing power because it basically put the local library in your backyard. So now to make those reads and writes, you can jump straight to that data, and it's a lot faster, less travel time, basically. You don't have to get in your car to go grab that book and bring it back. So that's why the M1 right off the bat is faster. That's called unified memory also. So you've got graphics processing, you have onboard computer processing, and they can now use the same RAM. So rather than having a bunch of different libraries, you have the same library you're going to, and you're going back and forth a lot faster. So that's unified memory. What's new with these brand new machines? Well, they're basically double and quadruple the speed of the initial M1. And I personally love the branding. I'm a part of a Facebook group it was called M1 and M2 or something, or M1X. And most people got the branding totally wrong. Apple, in kind of their good branding fashion, has rebranded this to the M1 Pro and the M1 Max. So you've got the M1. The M1 Pro is the middle of the road model, and then the M1 Max is the top of the line. But I want to back up and say the M1 Pro is not middle of the road. It's a fantastic processor. It's great. And the M1 Max is double great. It's super amazing what they've done. So the big question is, okay, what do we do about buying one of these things? Is it worth the money? Well, I do some video editing. Brian, you do video editing. If you're a video editor, that's sort of the target market. This is like, hey, you can video edit in a coffee shop now, legitimately, multiple 8K streams. You can process on board. That's a big deal.
Right.
So the question always when we're talking about, is it the right machine for me, is, can you afford it? Is it overpowered? I don't know. It just depends. I would say if you've got a 2015 or older, you've got a 5-6 year old Mac and you're ready, you sell off the old one, get one of these new ones. If anything, if you're not a big power user, just get the regular M1. I have it. It's a fantastic machine. Mm-hmm. But Brian, I want to hear from you. You've got yours. What's your first thoughts on it?
Well, my first thought was this is heavy.
Okay.
So just, a little background information. I am upgrading from a 2019 16-inch MacBook Pro, which is by no means an old computer, right?
No, not at all.
I've had mine for less than 2 years, and I've said I've justified for buying this new one. It's not just for this podcast, but
well, you were one of the people that have been waiting. You
Yes.
knew they're going to upgrade at some point. Here it is. You were literally waiting in line.
I was ready for it
digitally.
Because the regular M1 was very compelling, right? Because it was keeping up. They were benchmarking it against the very MacBook that I already have, and it was as good, right?
Yeah.
Everything essentially. And I did get a Mac Mini at the time, and it's just a server. I didn't really spend a lot of time on it, but this one, I think the biggest thing, so I'll back up a little bit. Initial impressions are the design of this. It looks different a little bit, and I think they've taken a step back from the sleek, like everything has to be super thin and light approach, because this is a pro machine, and it kind of looks like a pro machine now, more so than the other one. So the other one was real sleek and slim, but this one has it just looks like it can handle more, which is weird, right?
Well, and that, that's been the buzz in the community for the past couple of years. Like, I love the design of the current MacBook Pro, or I guess the previous generation.
Yeah.
But I mean, it was dongle gate, as we call it. So if you wanted HDMI, now you got a dongle hanging out of your computer, or maybe 2 or maybe 4 in some circumstances.
Yeah.
And, of course, Apple in the presentation says, we're going to give you these ports that, pro users love. And it's like, well, we haven't been able to love those ports for the past few years. So thank you for giving those ports back. So, but how much weight are we talking? I mean, what you say it's heavy?
It's heavy. I'd say it's almost half a pound different, probably, which is when you're carrying something around. And I haven't looked at the exact specs. We can probably pull those up if we want to. It feels heavier just to pick it up. Okay. It's got a little bit, it has feet, and it didn't have feet before. There's a little different. The keyboard looks different. I think I preferred all of the old styles. Yeah. But they're not deal breakers, because at the end of the day, this is a work computer. I'm going to work on it. I just want what the most important thing it does is the work, right? So, talk about the ports. It does have 3 Thunderbolt, 4 HDMI SD card. And I think, and this is kind of a subtle upgrade. Before, you had 2 on each side, but they were, it was the same bus. So while you had 4, they weren't independent. So you could totally overload one. And sometimes if you were doing a lot of peripheral work, you'd have to plug into opposite sides. Here we have 3 independent Thunderbolt ports, HDMI and the SD card. So it's got a lot more connectivity there. For power users, I think, that are plugging a ton of displays in. That's how I think they get away with being able to push what they can. So, mentioning the display, that's probably the most noticeable change here, or the most exciting looking thing. So you see the display, and it just looks good.
Well, and it's an XDR display,
Yeah.
But I have to mention the dreaded notch has made its way from the iPhone to iPad over too. So what do you think of the notch?
I don't notice it personally, and the part of that's the way I use the computer. I dock it, so it's not even in front of me, which is kind of sad. I almost want the really nice screen in front of me. So I have 2 large external monitors in front of me, and this display makes those look not quite as good, maybe.
For sure.
And really, if you're running full screen maps, you don't notice it. I don't notice it at all. And I think this has been more of an issue with the 14-inch. The notch is getting in the way of menu bar stuff. There's been some articles written about that, but personally, on the 16, I think it's a non-issue. They put that new camera in the notch, but I'm looking at it right now. It is what it is. It's not a big deal to me.
Well, I mean, people complain about stuff. They're going to find something to complain about. I mean, of course, a lot of the stuff you just mentioned, we're dealing with technology and stuff moving forward, but also the rest of the world. Like the world, as far as screens go, works on HDMI. So you know, unless you want to get into an adapter, you kind of need an HDMI port. And even in that circumstance, maybe the adapters don't work. There's a lot of third-party adapters out there that you just you plug in, they don't even work.
Yeah.
So if you're a photographer, the SD card slot's kind of a big deal because the cameras are not USB-C yet. You know, there's a lot of cameras. I just bought a camera not too long ago, and it's still USB micro on the side. I mean, there's ways to go for the world to get to that.
Think about the price of these things. You spend thousands of dollars if you're a photographer, and the first thing you have to do is go buy a dongle to plug an SD card in, which you're like, that's what you live on as a photographer, right? So I got to spend an extra $30, $40 just to take this little card and stick it in my computer when it's on a pro level machine. That's not right. So,
well, and there are solutions, you know, with cameras, a lot of them are trying to do like the wireless where it kind of connects your computer. They just don't work great, you know? And then when you're dealing with big data, like a lot of our customers, there's no moving hundreds of gigs fast over Wi-Fi and reliably. So you plug it in, you migrate it, it's done. So yeah, I'm happy to see that port back, especially like you said, on a pro machine. In the early days of the MacBook, I feel like that's the way it was, where you had kind of just a regular MacBook and then you had the Pro, and only professionals used it. But it got to the point where everybody has a MacBook Pro now.
Yeah.
And it's sort of like every college kid, they got to have the MacBook Pro and they really don't need it. This is definitely a circumstance where I would say the M1 basic 13-inch MacBook Pro or MacBook Air is fantastic. It's a great machine. So if that's what if you're in the market for that, great. So going back to the buyability, I want to say too, for resale value, I think I've seen the trend where kind of the middle range and lower range machines are going to sell quicker because they're cheaper, and there's a great resale market on the Mac. So if you're thinking, okay, I'm going to buy this M1 MacBook Air, but maybe I want the Pro, maybe start with the M1, see how you like it. If it's not enough, it's going to resell. Somebody's going to buy it quick.
Yeah.
So what else? Have you done any high power processing on it yet to see how it works?
I've done a little bit. So just as an experiment, I pulled up our last podcast on video and just rendered it again. Just why not, right? And it was a 20-minute, you know, it's only 1080. It's not 4K. It was at least twice as fast, if not 3 times. Wow. Like it was under a minute to render a 20-minute video.
Wow.
And there's not a lot going on there. So yeah. And you know, I'm running iStat menu so I can watch the processors bounce up and down when I'm working on stuff. I did the first thing to make it jump today, or before we started recording here. This on a whim about 25 minutes ago, I decided to install Windows 11 on a parallel VM.
Okay.
I did that in like 7 minutes.
Wow.
And it went very fast. That's great. And that's the first time I've seen any like processor activity, because the way the cores work on this, it's only using like 2 of them most of the time, like for just general tasks. And then the rest of them will just kind of ramp up on their own randomly. So I just ran Windows 11. And I also had at the same time a remote client running on a client machine while that was installing. Plus I had this software we're using now to stream. It was just open. So I had all those 3 things, which can be intensive. Happening at the same time. I didn't notice anything on the machine.
So you mentioned fan speed before.
Yeah.
What are your thoughts?
So one of the reasons I made this jump is I was on my previous MacBook, which is sitting next to me still, is an i9 8-core, had an 8 gig graphics card in it. It got super hot. So I think the thing I've noticed most just in my day-to-day work is how quiet it is. I used to have this white noise at my desk, just this like this hiss, like constant fan noise. I got used to it. And then, you know, I'd see it'd spin up every now and then. It didn't matter if I was doing anything intensive or not. I could be checking my email. Fan noise, constant.
Wow.
So the biggest thing I've noticed is it's just super quiet. So if you're in a audio environment, you're doing recordings or music, there's no noise. It's great.
Wow.
As far as that
honestly,
goes.
When you mentioned fan noise prior to starting, I was thinking you were going to have some bad news. Like it's getting so hot. It's spinning up. That's great.
I haven't heard the fan. Now there's a setting where I can do max performance, and I think that would spin up a fan. I haven't done that yet.
So I want to talk another sort of semi-technical, but also very practical business sort of element to computer processing. And that is throttling. So if we talk about, you might have the same specs on your PC or your different level Mac or whatever, but if we take the M1 MacBook Pro and the M1 MacBook Air, it is the same processor, but the MacBook Air is fanless. So if you're getting a MacBook Air, there are no fans. So technically when something gets hot, it has to slow down or it's going to basically cook the processor. So your MacBook Air is going to throttle if it needs to kind of pull that power back. So the MacBook Pro and now the M1 Max and M1 Pro, they have fans. The argument's already been made that the M1 Max or the 16-inch is a bigger space for more air to flow through. But in the Apple release video, I think they did a good job at talking about the topic I'm going to bring up, which is in the PC world. If your PC is not plugged into power, if you're on a laptop, it throttles it right off the bat. A lot of people don't know that, but if you have a Windows box and you're in a coffee shop and you're on battery, you're already throttling. So it's not even a thermal throttle. It's you don't have a power supply plugged in, I'm going to throttle the machine. So talking about, in the workforce efficiency, if you're using a PC out in the wild and you don't have your power brick, you're throttled. Boom. These MacBooks, they don't do that. So unless you're in the MacBook Air, that's the only one to my knowledge that would throttle, unless it's a thermal throttle and it's just getting hot. So another great argument towards using Mac in the enterprise is it's already faster. If you're rendering video, you're cutting any sort of photography, any sort of visual graphics, you're going to see an efficiency spike, I think, just in the usage of the machine, not to mention the throttling. So let's talk about price. So I'm just looking at apple.com here. You can see even not too long ago, this used to have a little new sign here under the MacBook Air and the MacBook Pro. So we can look at the different MacBook Pro models. They're now sort of combined. You get the 13 and then the new 14 to 16, which we've been heavily discussing here. So both models contain the Pro and the Max chip, 10-core CPU, 32-core GPU, and up to 64 gigs of RAM. That was a big complaint earlier where you could only go up to 16 on the M1 over here, you see. But we talked in a previous podcast as well that it's not necessarily an apples to apples comparison of, I would call it old 16, like non-unified memory 16 gigs. I almost say it's like a 50% to 1, it's pretty good. The other big thing is a 8 terabyte configurable storage on board your machine. Now, I was kind of talking to somebody the other day and I said, I'm not going to be getting the 8 terabyte on board. But I also remember a day, and a lot of people our age remember the day when it was awesome because you had a 128 meg flash drive in your pocket in college. And we thought, this is crazy. I'll never need a gig of anything. And now we're literally talking terabytes on your machine. So is it possible? Yes. We're starting to see a little bit of an influx back to machine power local on the machine. That was actually when Apple released the Mac Pro Tower. That was kind of a response of, hey, yeah, the cloud's great and all, but we got to have some horsepower to render this video. So we're going to make a box that you're going to run that video on directly, not have to deal with the cloud. Same thing here with the laptops. Impressive 21-hour battery life on the 16-inch. 21 hours for a laptop. That's running that speed and more than likely not being throttled too much at that point either. Also, a lot of people don't realize this, but the FaceTime camera has been a lag and a little bit behind. So now we're at 1080p. You sigh, Brian. What do you think?
Well, okay. So the camera, I'm not going to say good for you for putting a 1080p camera on this, right? I have an iPad Pro next to me.
Yeah.
That thing has like a 13 or 15 megapixel front facing insane camera. It's a touch thicker than the display. I mean, why are our pro computers that we use for meetings all day long, especially in 2020, 2021? Why is it not?
Yeah.
Well, it's just 1080.
I wonder that too. Yeah. I mean, honestly, when we do stuff like this, when we do the podcast, we have semi-professional cameras. We've got iPhones. We've got all the toys. But it is funny that right in front of me is staring at me multiple cameras that I don't use because they look terrible. So, we have to go external. And your point is perfect. Like, I can pull out my iPhone and shoot 4K 60 frames a second, and it looks just so smooth. And it's in a cell phone. So yeah, I would like to see a step up on that for sure.
Yeah, exactly.
But my gut's kind of like, well, nobody really uses that camera, but they do. People do that don't have the extra stuff. They're going to be using it. So
even if you're not a pro, I mean, MacBook Air, how many people use FaceTime to talk to their family on a Mac? Or grandma's got that.
Yeah.
The old one. Or what? Why are we at 720 on that? I mean, 720, you can't even buy a 720 TV anymore, right?
Well, exactly. Yeah.
Why does that technology exist?
I mean, honestly, even 1080 TVs are, they're starting to be old. So, so moving on here, weight, obviously weight difference there. We got a 4.7 pound 16-inch versus the 3 pound M1. Now, I opted for the M1 because I bought mine when the M1 came out. We do a lot of testing with MDM. We do deployments and stuff. And these machines are changing kind of the management world. So I wanted to get one just to see, like, what's it going to be like to erase it? What's it going to be like to do these things? I'm still happy with it. I think it's great. For mobility, 50% more weight. That's significant. But again, I feel like, and I wonder what you think too, Brian, I feel like this mobile workforce now is not so much, when we think mobile in the past, it used to be, hey, I'm going to run down to Starbucks and have a meeting and kind of work. Mm-hmm. Now the mobile is like, I'm actually at home working. So weight's it's not like you're going to be lugging this thing on an airplane as often as maybe in the past. Maybe you still do. But for that power, I think it's a trade-off. Like, hey, sure, I'll take the power for an extra pound in my bag.
Well, it's not a trade-off. I mean, from a performance, it's not a trade-off anymore. Like, you have a little extra weight to carry around. But I heard one reviewer compared to the 16-inch. Actually, it was a 15, the maxed out 14-inch. He says it's like having a Mac Pro in your backpack. Like the current level of Mac, which is an awesome machine, this is the same thing. Yeah. It's a smaller.
It's amazing.
So you have the mobility, you have freedom to move around. So a lot of people working from home, this is totally lap comfortable. You can sit and, it's big enough and do all your work on the couch. It's fine. Right?
That's awesome. Well, and the last thing that's compared here on the website is actually the fact that the regular M1 13-inch has the touch bar and the Touch ID. No more touch bar on the new guys. It's not even an option anymore. So, I like the touch bar. Everybody has their opinion on it. I think it's cool, but if I'm honest about it, I don't use it that much. I think it looks nice. I think the color's nice. There just wasn't a lot of great development for use for it. So it's probably more practical to just have the F keys up there. So we got Touch ID, obviously, but no more touch bar.
Yeah, I don't think Apple ever did anything with the touch bar either. Like, they put it in there a couple of years ago, and then
the coolest thing I ever saw in the touch bar was the pet, where you could have a little cat and it would walk across their touch bar. So, to each his own. So let's get down into the prices real quick. And I think we're live here on Facebook. So if anybody jumps on and has questions, feel free to pop in the comments and ask us questions and we'll try to answer them. But let's look at the price here on the 14-inch base model, $24.99, and just kind of I wouldn't call this a pro tip, but if you really want one quick and you're willing to jump into the store, Brian, like you did, you can basically go put it in your cart and just kind of refresh. And when it becomes available, you can go ahead and buy it and go pick it up.
Yeah, that's the launch day trick
models.
Anyway, they're gone now. I think everyone's probably figured that out already. But
there's always too late for that.
There's always someone in the store on launch day because they want someone to walk in and be able to grab it.
And those are base model. That's not going to be, you're not going to be able to go in there and get the 8 terabytes of storage. So, but if we look at these, let's just go ahead and configure one. So I'm going to jump straight to the top. You see, you've got the M1 Pro again, and then the M1 Max. If you're configuring the middle one and you can bump the processor up, which basically bumps you up to this level anyway. And of course, Apple has priced it at such a way where you start configuring a pretty good M1 Pro and you think, man, for a couple hundred more bucks, I could have that M1 Max. And so, there you go. $400 to jump to 64 gigs of RAM. And then of course it's $2,200 to jump to the 8 terabytes. But, and I do want to say this, I was thinking, if you built out a Synology or some sort of a server, if you're like a Lone Ranger and you got a server and all this mess, which is great. I think that's good. But if you're a Lone Ranger and you're just a video editor on your own, well, don't buy the Synology, pay for a solid backup and keep everything local. It's a thought. And it might actually be cheaper for you in the long run. Wow. So, it seems crazy, but as you look at it, you build this machine out to, what are we at? $6,099. I mean, gosh, if you're a video editor, single shop person, it actually isn't too bad. $508 a month if you do that. Now, I did want to talk also about Apple Care Plus. This came out a little while ago. We haven't talked about it, but they do give you the option here now. It's $400 for coverage. Now, and I just want to talk about the feet for a second. So, Brian, you said the feet are back on there. So I had a MacBook Pro probably 5-6 years ago with the feet on it. And I had a problem with it. And I can't even remember. There was something going on inside, and one of the feet kind of came off. That used to be sort of one of the annoying things about the feet. Well, I took it in to get a repair, ended up needing something, and it needed the whole bottom plate replaced. It was an $850 repair without Apple Care. With Apple Care, it's all taken care of.
Yeah.
It is insurance. So it's like people ask all the time, is it worth getting Apple Care? Well, it's a roll of the dice. It's like any other insurance. You might use it and you might be like, oh my gosh, I just saved myself $1,000, or you might not use it or whatever. It depends on how hard you are on the machine. For us in the enterprise, we pretty much always recommend it, because if you're a business owner and you're buying these machines for your staff and you're going to your Apple custom store and you're building these machines out, honestly, and I hate to say it, but most people don't take care of machine that's given to them versus when they buy it. So if you're a business owner buying it for somebody that may be a new employee, I'd get Apple Care on that thing, even if it's $400.
Yeah, even if you're like a solo guy, your livelihood is your computer. So
yes, yeah,
you don't want to drop it. If this one, you drop your $6,000 computer, that $400 is nothing, right?
Exactly.
Get it back.
Yes. Yeah, just get it back. Give me that thing fast. And if you go third party, try to get it repaired elsewhere. That's a whole nother ball of wax. Yeah. But the new coverage plan here, the annual coverage plan, is $149.99 per year until canceled. Now, this is a pretty interesting. This is a pretty interesting thing here. Of course, this is. I don't know how long they've had this option available. They kind of snuck it in there. Didn't hear a lot about it. But if it's $150 in 2 years, you've spent $300. So technically, if you went for 3 years, which is the standard coverage, you're going to pay a little bit more. But if you think you're going to sell, it might. If you say, okay, I'm going to keep this for 2 years and then I'm going to upgrade, or let's say, for example, that scenario before, I buy the M1 and I'm not sure, maybe I want the Pro, or maybe I want the Pro Max, but I think I might drop down to the M1. it might make sense to get the annual coverage, and then you don't have to plunk it all down at once, and you can just shift the coverage.
That makes sense.
Yeah.
So I bought AppleCare on my previous computer, 3 years worth. I haven't had it for 2 years. It's gone. It's leaving. It's the box is coming today to send it back. So I've lost a couple $100 there probably. So and someone like myself who's I upgrade every couple of years now.
Yeah.
You know,
it makes sense. Well, and I know from a business standpoint, when we deploy the software on a managed service client, we're looking at that stuff. We're looking for warranty expirations. We're looking for some of that stuff. So a lot of times we'll warn somebody, hey, this machine's AppleCare is about to run out. Is there anything wrong with it? Because you got a couple more days. And once we roll over that 3-year mark, you're on your own. This gives you an option to say, you know what, we're going to go a little bit longer. Because we, in the professional world, we say, I tell customers 3 years, like staying in warranty is like best, but you're probably going to be able to get 5 out of this Mac, and it's probably going to be usable really well for 5 years. I've had customers that have Macs for 10 years. And of course, at that point, we don't want to touch it because it's just a ticking time bomb. But I think this is a great option as a business owner to say, you know what? I got a machine. It's kind of on its last leg, maybe, but I might be able to give it to the intern and squeeze a little bit of out of it. And if it has a problem or screen breaks or something, I got a little coverage on it. I think it's a great option, especially as a business owner, to look at something like that for your Macs. So awesome. Any questions? Feel free to reach out to us. Drop into Facebook, Instagram, TikTok, Twitter, all the places. Shoot us an email, atlascarolina.com. Go check out our blog. We do have a blog up about the new features of iOS 15, which Mac OS 15, which comes on these new machines. So check out those new features. If you're a business owner and you have questions about managing these Macs, or you need help, or you're thinking about getting into Mac, reach out to us. We're here for you to help you in any way that we can. Otherwise, you guys have a great day, and we'll see you on the next podcast.